My background is I was a startup CEO for 30 years. I started four different companies. I'm also trained as a writer. I was a graduate of the Stanford writing program, and I won a prize in the Mademoiselle College Fiction Contest, and I've been working on a book forever. Who knows if I'll ever get it finished, but so I do a lot of writing, and I have participated in many, many different types of writing classes, which definitely, my experience as a student and practitioner definitely inform my strategy as a tutor.
Mm. So what types of students are you working with now? How do you work with them, and what are they usually doing with you?
So most of my students are in Shanghai. I have a couple in the States, a couple in other parts of China, and they're pretty much middle school. They're 6, 7, and 8. I do have a couple of kids who are a little bit older, but most of my students are middle school students. The kids really want to improve their writing skills. And writing is a lot like playing the piano. It's something that, in order to get better at it, you just need to practice. There's kind of no shortcut. Also, I think writing goes hand in hand with critical thinking around reading and being able to read and analyze a text. And so I try and find books that the kids really will love, and will also help them start to develop a habit of becoming lifelong readers. I've got a few kids who are reading Into Thin Air by Jon Krakauer. For example, we'll look at why would an author choose to open the book at the top of Everest instead of at the bottom? And what does that strategy do for how the storyline is structured? I'm a believer in being really efficient with people's time, because I don't like to waste my time. And so we're really able, in half an hour a week, which I know is short for most kids, do about 15 minutes analyzing and critiquing the essay. The kids write 2 to 3 paragraphs each week based on an assignment I give them that's derived from the text. Mm-hmm. And so we go through that. We look at, how are they doing in terms of structuring their sentences. We do some grammar. And we do, what's the strategic thinking, and what's the structure of the essay, and what their strategic thinking is, and what the arguments and insights they have. And, I have to say they're doing extraordinarily well. But, they're writing a lot, and they have all improved so dramatically, and their grades have gone up. On average, most of the kids I'm tutoring have improved their English grade by a half or a full grade since we started. And then we spend the second 15 minutes looking at the text itself and talking about what kind of strategies is the author using to construct the narrative, what's going on with the characters, why are certain choices being made, so that this is over a long period of time, the kids learn to internalize the models that the writers use and then can use them themselves. I want to make sure that the kids know that I'm working for them. And that's an unusual concept to them, because they're used to being subservient to their teachers and their parents, of course, right? But mm-hmm. I want them to see me not so much as a peer, because I'm not a middle schooler, but as somebody who is supporting their goals. So they have goals. They want to go to certain schools. They want to accomplish certain things. And I let them know that I will do everything I can in my power to get them to their goals, so that they know that I'm working for them and I'm there to support them. I am there for them. And, they'll send me their poetry and their music and their own creative stuff, which I love, and I'm happy to listen to and read and give them critiques on, which they like a lot. So it's a very, rich relationship. And it can be done in 30 minutes. It really can.
That kids aren't reading as much anymore these days, but it seems like in general in our like whole world, people don't spend that much time reading.
Well, I want these kids to really become readers. And I think the way to do that is to expose them to great books.
Yes.
And the right books for their age and their level of maturity and their knowledge. And so I have a very big repertoire of books to draw from. And I'm able to kind of match the books with the kids' interests and desires. And also I really make a big deal out of like, we're moving on. It's time to pick another book. I'm so excited. Like, which book are you going to pick?
Yeah.
So I make it really a big, important thing. The selection of the book. And then when the kids are finished, they always have to write a full book report, so that, I sort of can confirm that they've learned what they need to learn from the books. And I think if you get the right books, I mean, I started out with Little Women. No one wants to read Little Women. I adore Little Women, but these kids don't want to read Little Women. So we're not going to read Little Women. Some of the kids want to read the classics.
Yeah.
One of my students is asked to read Moby Dick, and I said, "Are you sure you want to read Moby?" Like, okay, I've read it. I'm happy to do it again. But it's a big commitment. And then, some of them want to read these thrillers that if they're like, we did the Hunger Games. It actually turns out the Hunger Games is really literature. It's much better than I thought it would be. And they loved that. They loved the young girl who chose the Hunger Games. She loved it. So the other thing I'm doing, which is, I think, unique, we had 10 minutes left over in one of the lessons. And so I said, okay, instant essay. And we just open up the chat drawer of either Skype or Zoom. I write the first sentence, they write the second sentence, and we write sentences together. And those essays turn out to be really good,
Cool.
So the kids can model themselves on my technique, but, they can have their own original ideas. So between giving them the right books and also the right essay topics. So I want them to be challenged as well in terms of thinking about literature. Because I think it's more fun for them. The more challenging it is, the more fun it is.
Yeah. What do you think is the difference between a student reading just on their own versus going through this process with you? And having more feedback, and then also integrating it with writing in terms of, how they then go on to approach like their other academic subjects or just reading more generally.
Well, I think that, they're learning how to write essays essentially. And so when you're writing and reading together, when you're reading and then writing about what you've read, it requires you to think more deeply about the material. And when you think more deeply about the material, you find it's really interesting, or you may find insights that you didn't think of. So I think that they have, it's great for stimulating their curiosity in a way that, unless you have a reading habit, a really good reading habit, which I know most kids don't, this is a way to at least get them to see, there's really great stuff out there. So, because they understand, all right, you need a first sentence that's a real killer. and that articulates the thesis of your argument. And then you go right in, you don't dawdle, you go straight into your insights about the topic, and then evidence from the book that supports those insights, and a conclusion. So it's a basic structure,
right?
But until you do it 500 times, you don't get good at it. And then it becomes second nature, so that by the time they get to boarding school and college, they know how to write an essay. Right. And so they can be very comfortable. They don't have to be struggling with the basic tools of how to communicate their ideas. They've already learned those things.
Yeah.
They all tell me that their biggest deficits are vocabulary and writing.
Right.
So I try and work on those things with them, and just make sure that they check in with themselves about words that they're coming across that may not be familiar. That they look them up, and I know they don't too much, but that's okay. We look them up. So over time, the vocabulary starts to build.
Yeah. So in terms of like the book selection, you talked about that being like a very important piece of the process and an exciting part.
That's one thing that I am really good at, is picking the books, because I've read so much, and I love literature and reading so much that we negotiate, even though I sort of have a list, pretty broad list.
Yeah.
And, for a while I had a lot of them reading Sherman Alexie, the Native American writer, because I knew they would have no exposure to that culture. And he's wonderful, and the book is full of these incredible illustrations, and they really love that. And we've done The Kite Runner, and I try and keep things fairly contemporary, but occasionally we've done Gerald Durrell, whose wonderful book, My Family and Other Animals, which was written in the 40s. And, I'll pull things out that are a little slightly obscure, but are still really good stories for the right kid,
Right.
So
I think they're at least with kids who start to get older, there tends to be a misconception that a book has to be like really hard for it to be worth reading. If it's help you in some way.
Right.
It has to be related to something very specific, or it has to be a classic, to fit into these more narrow categories. But it's good to hear.
It doesn't. Like one of my students, who's a guy, we did Pride and Prejudice, and then which he loved, and of course it's like my all-time favorite. And now we're doing Cuckoo's Nest, which I thought, that's going to be really interesting for him. Have mysteries and Agatha Christie, and MI6 stories about MI6, and one book that's been really successful is The Fault in Our Stars, which is a beautiful story.
Such a good story.
Wonderful story, and there's so much to talk about in that book. So I think we have a pretty good list. Yeah, right now the big books are Kite Runner, Cuckoo's Nest, and the John Krakauer. Really, and that's one of the most fun things, is that I imagine that these kids, when they look back on their tutoring experiences with me, they've built their own kind of library. They've learned like how thrilling it is and wonderful it is to have read all these books and to sort of have a library of your own.
The age group that you're working with right now it's a very important age demographic, because you can really instill that love for reading at a time when you're kind of all of a sudden able to like read more complex stories and books and actually understand them and process them, but you're still kind of malleable enough that you can develop that love for reading early on. I mean, I see a lot of students, if they don't have that by the time they get to high school, it becomes so much more of a slog just to
Yes.
get through
It
your
makes a big
classes.
difference.
And then, there's very little time because all of
Yeah.
a sudden you are just on this like hamster wheel, this rat race to get through everything else. So
Right.
I think it's like a perfect age group that you get to work with to like
Right.
develop those skills, and then, to put them into practice throughout high school academically, but also, I mean, for reading, I feel like you're developing a library, and you're also developing like this kind of subconscious like knowledge that is able to go across many different areas. And
Yes. That's my
oftentimes, like,
goal.
people don't even realize how much they know, or you are able to make connections between, a John Krakauer story and something you find in, whatever,
Yeah.
AP environmental class or something later on. So
Yeah.
like you never really know how all those connections are going to come to be. But especially for students, during a pandemic or when you can't go anywhere, I feel like it's such a wonderful way to like explore the world too, in like
Yeah.
time and space, and just have so much more exposure to things.